you had a lot of quality players making their way to the top of the standings.
We see Reid shuffling still while Brad already has his hand, implying that he's taking a mulligan down to at least 6. Again, Brad is going to be your #1 seed for the tournament. You see Reid is your 5th seed, so Nelson will be playing first throughout the entire top 8, which is pretty important.
Yeah, very considering his deck can get these really aggressive starts, particularly with Skursdog High Priest, getting that into play and getting it active on turn 3 when your opponent just has 2 mana in play, that's very huge. So being on the play for the rest of the top 8 is obviously very good for Brad. It also puts a lot of pressure on Reid here to really get those far seeks, because for at least 2 games he's going to be on the draw. So he really can't fall that far behind Brad's deck. So here we go. Reid's going to check his 6-card hand, see if he's happy with it. Looks like he is thinking it over, and he is okay. So we're going to have a turn 1 Godless Shrine from Brad Nelson and a pass. Let's see what Reid can muster here. Just going to be a turn 1 Blood Crypt. And we have a Cartel Aristocrat drawn from Brad. So it looks like he has some lands, a Cartel Aristocrat. He also has the signature card, so to speak, of his deck in Varolz, the Scar Striped, to go along with the Voice of Resurgence, it looks like. So let's see what he decides to play first. Reid does have a couple of copies of Pillar of Flame, so maybe he's just debating which 2-drop he wants. It looks like there's a Blood Artist coming down too. So yeah, Voice of Resurgence, Cartel Aristocrat, Blood Artist are the 2 drops that he has, and he decides to lead with a Voice of Resurgence.
Yeah, it's interesting, he wants to lead that way instead of maybe starting with Cartel Aristocrat to try to bait out a removal spell, because Reid's deck doesn't play like a blue-white-red flash deck would, where this one might not be as important to establish. Maybe that's why he's starting there, trying to maybe bait out a Pillar of Flame on this, and then have his Cartel Aristocrat later, because that's the more important card of them. As you see, he's going to play a Temple Garden, play a Skursdog High Priest, and pass the turn back.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you how much he values that Cartel Aristocrat. And here we see the High Priest, and it puts even more pressure on Reid, because Reid knows there's a good chance that High Priest can get activated next turn, especially with Brad on 4 mana. So does he have an answer to the High Priest, or are we going to start seeing demons cranking out on Brad's side of the board?
Yeah, and the Jund deck wants no part of demons cranking out. It's hard to it's hard to chase those down with a Bonfire of the Damned. It's going to take 6 mana and a Miracle off the top, among other things, to be able to take care of that card. So 1 demon, literally just 1 demon, changes everything in the game.
Yeah, if Reid doesn't have a really good answer to the High Priest right here, Brad's next turn could involve a Cartel Aristocrat and a Blood Artist potentially, allowing him to sack the Elemental, the Voice of Resurgence, to get an Elemental, trigger the Morbid, and allow him to generate a 5/5. So his board presence would be pretty dominating. So let's see if Reid does in fact have an answer. And no, he does not. He just has a Vampire Nighthawk. So we'll see how Brad is able to negotiate this turn. He does have a 4th land, so he can choose to cast both Cartel Aristocrat and Blood Artist this turn. He also has a Varolz, the Scar Stripe, which is another way to sacrifice the Voice of Resurgence. Let's see what Brad decides to do. He's got 4 cards, plenty of ways to activate Trigger Morbid this turn. Reid just has the Vampire Nighthawk, and Brad's debating whether or not he wants... I can't imagine he doesn't want to play the Cartel Aristocrat and the Blood Artist this turn. It looks like that's what we're going to see here. He can't, unfortunately, he can't attack with the Voice of Resurgence first, but he can still sacrifice it and trigger the Morbid. Let's see if he's going to just pass the turn here, or is he going to try to do it on his main phase.
I'd be a little surprised if he passed the turn without doing it. I don't think he wants to get anything broken up. I mean, just by sacrificing Voice of Resurgence, putting in a 4/4, get a little draining game with the Blood Artist, and pump out a 5/5, and then have kind of all of his, little things online, all the different things he can do with sacrifice effects and Morbid and Blood Artist triggers and stuff like that. But we're looking at probably the best Junk Aristocrats player in the world.
Yeah.
He knows his deck better than anybody, so all we can do is guess at what we think he may do.
So Brad's going to go for it on his main phase. He sacrifices the Voice of Resurgence. Blood Artist triggers, dropping Reid down to 17, bringing Brad up a life. And now the Morbid triggers, and he's able to put a demon into play. So now, on turn 4, Brad Nelson has a Blood Artist, a Cartel Aristocrat, a Skursdog High Priest, a 5/5 Elemental token, and a 5/5 demon.
And Reid has a Vampire Nighthawk.
3 lands and a Vampire Nighthawk. So, not the best position for Reid right here. Vampire Nighthawk, we know that Brad doesn't have any removal currently, so Vampire Nighthawk potentially could trade with the demon, but again, that High Priest is still active. If Reid doesn't have an answer for it, those 5/5 demons are going to keep coming.
You see Reid very carefully draw his card that turn, and this is something that we brought up the last time these two players played. Reid draws his card like that very, very often. Doesn't want to give away any information about if it is or is not a Bonfire of the Damned. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We don't really know, as he putrefies a Skirt Stack High Priest, and the reason you don't know is because he always draws his card that way.
Yep.
Which is just a good thing to do.
Yeah, he kind of never gives anything away. Sometimes you kind of have to put him on the Bonfire Dam. Other times maybe he's bluffing it. But either way, Brad's still going to play around. Brad doesn't really have to worry about that much here. He's still got the 5/5 in play. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the High Priest anymore, and he just drew a land for the turn, so he doesn't really have that much more gas. Although that's kind of silly considering what his board state is right now.
Yeah.
So he's going to be swinging in with 2 5/5s and a 4/4 Cartel Aristocrat, which is got 2+1/+1 counters after the scavenge ability of Varal's is initiated. So
yeah, just look at what Varal's can do here. You know, playing a 2/2 in the beginning will make his Cartel Aristocrat a 4/4 that can protect itself at any point. It just has such a huge impact on the game for a 3-mana 2/2. That's not all that card is, because I mean, moving forward for the next turn, he can scavenge with the Skirt Stack High Priest from Varal's, get a little more power that way. Depending on if he draws like a Doom Traveler, he can do a little more scavenging as well. So Varal's has a huge impact on things moving forward. Not to mention that is going to be very difficult for Reid to kill because it can regenerate, as you see Duke draw and play a Thragtusk for the turn.
And that's probably the ideal card for Reid. We know Brad's kind of out of gas right now. Yep, he just has 2 lands in his hand. He has one more creature in his graveyard that he can scavenge to make his Cartel Aristocrat now a 6/6, I believe, or a 5/5. So not too bad. It'll be big enough to kind of attack through a Thragtusk and still give himself protection. But Reid is now forced to decide, what does he want to do? What do I block here? He doesn't really have a great block. Cartel Aristocrat can get saved with the Blood Artist. Blood Artist kind of did its job right now. I don't know if you need the Blood Artist in play. You'd obviously rather save the Cartel Aristocrat, probably.
Yeah,
you'll get another creature in your graveyard.
Blood Artist can do a little bit more work too now, though. So this, I think, more than anything, doesn't put Brad to the test. I think it puts Reid to the test of which creature do you want to block. And let's say that he blocks the Cartel Aristocrat. Maybe Brad is perfectly fine saying, okay, it dies. You know, 2 Blood Artist triggers, and then you take 3 from the Varals and then 4 from my Elemental token. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total.
Yep.
And then Blood Artist is still sitting there looming. So it really makes I don't think it makes Brad make a decision. I think it makes Reid make a decision on how he wants to block, and if he can maybe make a block so that it forces Brad to want to sacrifice something.
Yep.
Or maybe Brad doesn't care at all.
And I like this block from Reid right here, because now Brad's put to test again. You know, they're constantly shifting the decision making back and forth. You know, Reid's going to end up getting a 3/3 after this. He will end up taking 7, dropping to 5, and then he's going to take some life loss from the Blood Artist, so he's probably going to go down to 3 this turn. However, what creature does Brad sacrifice? If he wants to actually kill the Thragtusk, he's going to have to sacrifice something. If he wants the Blood Artist trigger to get maximized, he's going to have to let the Cartel Aristocrat die. Otherwise, does he sacrifice the Blood Artist to Cartel Aristocrat to keep it alive?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind too is that, you know, he can easily let the Cartel Aristocrat trade with the Thragtusk. You know, let the Blood Artist triggers happen. There'll be 2 of them, and then with Cartel Aristocrat being in the graveyard, it gives him access to a Varal Scavenge activation as well. So there are a lot of things that he needs to think about on this turn, because additionally, with the Blood Artist being in play, it makes it so that all of Reid's pinpoint removal, he probably has to start by taking care of the Blood Artist. Imagine next turn if Reid were to miracle a Bonfire of the Damned, he would kill himself.
Yeah. He actually can't miracle a Bonfire at that point. So it looks like Cartel Aristocrat is going to die, and let's see where he decides to put the scavenge.
Even if he wants to do it this turn.
Yeah, I think it's possible he might want to put it on the Blood Artist to give himself another attacker, but it looks like he's just going to pass the turn and see what Reid does, give himself a little more options next turn. So Reid untaps, currently just has a Beast in play, still has to deal with that Blood Artist because he is at 3 life.
So now he draws a card very slowly yet again.
And again, Bonfire of the Dam, probably not something he wants to cast right now at 3 life.
It's very rare where top decking a Bonfire of the Damned is not the thing you want to do against opposing creatures. Yet here we are.
So, yeah, with Varal's scavenge ability being very relevant right here. He not only needs a way to deal with the Blood Artist, he needs to actually get another blocker into play as well. So Huntmaster of Fells would actually be a pretty good top deck here.
Be quite a good top deck.
He'll go up to 5. He'll get some blockers. Again, he's still going to have to eventually deal with that Blood Artist, but if he can dodge another, spell from Brad on his turn, possibly maybe he can flip that Huntmaster and eventually deal with that Blood Artist. So let's see what Reid decides to do here. Does he have, what options are available to him?
You know, one thing that, Nelson always talks about with his deck is one of the problems with the Aristocrat decks being any of them, as you see, Duke is going to cast a Olivia Voldaren and shoot down that Blood Artist for a drain and gain for Nelson, make it 25-2. But one thing that's very difficult for Nelson's deck is that it can't mitigate mana flood. That's the one thing it can't do, and because it's so many colors and color intensive, you can't kind of free roll the bunch of different, like Gavany Township type lands. He can't do that. As this turn, Nelson draws a Lingering Souls, which would have been a lethal Lingering Souls had that Blood Artist been in train, all those sacrifice triggers there from Varol's. Now he's got the uphill climb of having to beat Olivia Voldaren, which, if you've watched Semi Standard before, you know that's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Thankfully, though, that Lingering Souls will make the Elemental much, much larger. So it looks like Reid is going to be forced to chump block this turn with both of his creatures, and Brad will still be left with an army on his side of the board.
So Lingering Souls plus Flashback is going to give Nelson 4 Spirit Tokens. You also see the Scavenge there with the Cartel Aristocrat onto Varol's. And you see Reid reaching. He knows that he has to block both of his guys, just as you mentioned. And again, if it's Bonfire the Damned, it's not the best thing in the world. It's not the worst, because Bonfire for 2 would kill everything but Varol's, I believe.
Yeah, if he can Bonfire for 2, let's say he miracles now, and he's able to follow it up with a blocker or chump blocker. Brad actually used both sides of the Lingering Souls already, so he won't really have a follow-up next turn. So let's see what... Oh, we have a Thrag test here. It goes up to 7. He will have to... It looks like he might just be forcing Reid.
Oh, and there's a Blood Artist off the top, and that's going to get it done. So Brad Nelson is going to win game number 1 here over Reid Duke. Junk Aristocrats up 1 over Jun. And I think what was happening there on that last turn of the game is, as we mentioned, oddly enough,
Reid does not concede.
Yeah, during the last time they played us, Reid does not concede. If you're going to beat him, you got to kill him.
Yeah. And it didn't even matter. Brad just dropped that Blood Artist in play. It's obvious what's happening here. So Brad Nelson wins the first game. Again, I think being on the play and Reid down a card, it was a little too much for Reid to overcome. Brad's start was pretty good. Obviously getting a Skurzdark High Priest active on turn 4. Pretty good position to be in. Reid drew the Putrefy for the High Priest, but it turned too late, unfortunately. So let's see if Reid can muster a better start in the second game. After board, we kind of went over it in the Swiss, but he does have some cards that are pretty good in this matchup. He has 2 copies of Duress, 2 Tragic Slip, 1 Rakdos Return, 2 Ground Seals, 1 Curse of Deathhold, 1 Pillar of Flame, 3 Liliana, 1 Underworld Connections, and 2 Rurik Cathar, the Unbowed. You can see it on the screen there. Obviously, Curse of Deathhold, one of those cards that are very effective against Brad Nelson's deck. We saw Brad able to navigate around it, but it really depends on, can he get Varol's in play and make it big enough that it doesn't matter. And the same thing with Obzida. Obzida is another way that you can potentially beat a Curse of Deathhold. But definitely that card's coming in. You have 1 copy of Pillar Flame. That'll bring the number of copies 3 in total. And that's a card that's very effective against Brad decks. It deals with Voice of Resurgence. It deals with Doom Traveler. So that's obviously coming in as well. Beyond that, though, not sure he wants to bring in the Duress. There's too many chances that it could just miss there. Tragic Slip, I can see Tragic Slip coming in too, just because it's another way to deal with Obzida, potentially.
I mean, part of the reason I like Tragic Slip coming in, Duke has 2 in his main deck and 2 in the sideboard. I think he wants to move up to all 4s because Nelson has Tragic Slip in his deck. And so Nelson can so easily activate Tragic Slip for him. So as a result, he'll be actually activating Tragic Slip for Duke.
Yes.
He makes it much easier for Duke to actually have Morbid on his Tragic Slip. And I think that that's pretty important there if you read. You just saw how he lost the last game. It involved a Skurzdark High Priest. You'd like to be able to control that, and you'd like to be able to do it efficiently as far as mana is concerned, because 3 mana for a Putrefy to take out a 2 mana card in Skurzdark High Priest, you'd rather say that Putrefy for a much higher casting cost card like Obzida.
Yeah, it's a cheap way to kill a card like Obzida or Varol's potentially, and it's also a cheap spell that allows you potentially to flip your Huntmasters, and we saw that definitely be a huge factor in the Swiss Browns.
We take a look at Nelson's sideboard on the screen. 4 Deathrite Shaman, 1 Sin Collector, 3 Abrupt Decay, 2 Smite, an additional Obsidian Ghost Council to go along with the one in his main deck, 2 Appetite for Brains, and 2 Duress. It's difficult because Appetite for Brains is pretty good against Duke, but there's a subset of cards that it is poor against. You want to bring it in, but there are certainly going to be situations where it is very poor. It's the last card that you want to draw when you get into the mid to late game. The same can be said for Duress as well, but the benefit of those cards in the early game so that you can, 1, probably strip a card from their hand, and 2, be able to work with information on what's in their hand to craft your game plan is invaluable.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where obviously Brad's not ecstatic about bringing those cards in because there are times where he could either whiff or they're dead later in the game, but I think they're just too important to stop some of the really potentially devastating cards out of Reid's deck, something like a Curse of Death's Hold or an Olivia Voldaren. Those are cards that you could snag with an Appetite for Brains. Obviously, there's a risk there later in the game when you're in top deck mode, and those cards are obviously less effective, but I still think Brad kind of wants those cards in this matchup to kind of live or keep Reid honest and protect himself from some of the more devastating cards he has to face.
Other options, again, you see a Sin Collector kind of goes into the discard package, but it is a body as opposed to not being a body. Also, 3 Abrupt Decay is not great in this matchup, of course. Obsidian is going to certainly join us, as we saw when they played earlier. Brad did draw his second Obsidian, and it's a great card in this matchup, in this grindy affair. It really puts pressure on Duke to have a Putrefy or be able to Morbid a Tragic Slip to be able to take care of it. So those are the options available to both players, as we do have an update from our other match very quickly. Josh McClain does take game number 1 against Valentin Mackel. Junk Reanimator currently ahead of Ban Hexproof.
Wow, so a little surprised there. Again, we thought the Hexproof might be a little favored there, but again, it really comes down to whether or not they can get a Geist of Saint Traff going. So we'll see how that matchup plays out.
One thing important too is that because McClain is your 2 seed and Mackel is your 3 seed, McClain being on the play for game 1 may have been instrumental to that victory.
Ah, yes. So both players are debating what they keep, and they both keep 7 this time. So Reid Duke leads with a Stomping Ground, and Brad Nelson just has a Sun Petal Grove.
Osip, I smell a Farseed.
I feel like he's very happy with his hand.
I don't know why.
Woodland Cemetery.
I don't know
and
why.
There it is.
I smell a Farseed.
Turn 2 Farseed. Reid Duke's signature card.
That's right.
And there's a Blood Crypt. So pretty good start for Reid, exactly what he wants. Ideally, you want to see a Huntmaster of the Fells right here.
Yeah.
If you're him on turn 3. Brad, anything Brad plays is going to be outclassed by a Huntmaster right here.
Yeah,
so
you just want to get to the board now. I mean, be it Olivia or be it Huntmaster of the Fells, you just want to get something on the board, because I remember that game 3 that we watched between the 2 players a little bit earlier, where Reid got himself up to 4-man on turn 3 via Farseek and had nothing to do on that turn.
Oh wow! So a huge break there for Reid. Brad just has another Sun Petal Growth. So now Reid does have an Olivia. This would be actually pretty devastating for Brad, because Brad doesn't have many answers beyond Tragic Slip.
Well, speak of the devil.
And he can't cast Tragic Slip and sacrifice a creature in the same turn. So Olivia might get a couple activations here.
Speak of the devil, and it shall appear. Olivia Voldaren in play. You see Nelson's hand right now. He does have a Garruk Relentless in his hand. He also has a bunch of things that he can cast, but you see him not play anything, and the reason for that is because he actually has to make it so Olivia can't get any larger.
Yep.
So he can play Garruk Relentless, fight it, and win the fight.
Yeah, so there are no creatures that Olivia can ping, so it can't get +1/+1 counters. Therefore, Garruk can actually kill it. Unfortunately, Brad is going to have to waste his turn casting Garruk and just killing the Olivia. Now, obviously, he doesn't want to do it, but he kind of has to. He has to deal with the Olivia somehow.
So that's exactly what happens. Garruk Relentless takes care of Olivia, but in the meantime, Duke did slide in a 5-3. That's going to be attacking right now, putting Nelson down to 12. And if Reid does have a follow-up Olivia Voldaren, Brad is in that same rock and a hard place position, but just, and I say just in quotes, a Huntmaster of the Fells.
Yeah, and we kind of said this is the position Reid has to be in. He has to get those creatures in play so that all his removal can be even more backbreaking against Brad. So Brad, really tough spot. He had those Sun Petal Growths, so he wasn't able to really get any of those Voice of Resurgences into play earlier. Kind of worked out for him because he was able to actually kill an Olivia with a Garruk, but either way, he's under a lot of pressure right here.
Absolutely. As Reid does resolve an additional Farseek and pass the turn back. So now Nelson has to play catch-up. And His deck can play defense pretty well because of Voice of Resurgence, being able to block and then put out elemental tokens that are actually going to be bigger than the 2/2 that Voice of Resurgence often is. But again, we have mentioned this multiple times when watching Jund play. Jund is a deck that is a control deck by nature, but when this deck turns the corners on offense, that's not a spot that you want to be in against them. And now he gets to just be offensive, but additionally he gets to actually control what happens with his Hunt Match of the Fells, because Brad is forced to play spells, but Reid is not.
Yeah, and again, Brad does have 2 copies of Voice Resurgence. He has a 3rd in his hand, and he has Lingering Soul. So those elemental tokens, if they come into play, will be fairly large.
Still no Bonfire of the Damned here for Duke, as he drew his card very slowly and puts it to his hand. 2 cards in his hand, and now you see him go into the tank, figuring out what attacks he feels are best and how he wants to craft this game plan.
Yeah, unfortunately, he does not have a Kessick Wolfrun to help him break through. 5 here. Oh, Curse of Death Soul, the one of in his sideboard. Now all Brad's creatures are going to get -1/-1. He has to double block in order to kill the Huntmaster of the Fells.
And this is a huge play on this turn, because you see Brad going for the double block here. He's going for the double block, maybe considering double blocking Huntmaster of the Fells, but think of what happens when both, if he does double block, think of what happens when both Voice of Resurgences die. They don't come back into play at the same time. It's 2 separate triggers.
That's true, yeah.
So one will come in as a 1/1 and then become a 0/0 due to Curse of Deathhold. So if he double blocks, no elemental tokens.
And Brad realizes that and blocks only one of them. So they will come into play as a 2/2 and then shrink down to a 1/1 due to Curse of Deathhold. So Brad ends up taking 4. And let's see what Reid has here.
Does he have
Looks
a
like
tragic
there's
slip?
a tragic
He
slip
does.
as well. So
wow. So that tragic slip clears away everything that we just spoke of. Brad draws his card, picks up his permanents, and we're moving on to, fittingly enough, a 3rd and final game between Duke and Nelson.
yeah, and you saw just how devastating Curse of Deathhold has the potential to be in this matchup. Again, Reid had an excellent start. Brad stumbled for the first few turns, couldn't really commit anything to the board because of those Sun Petal Groves. And then Reid had turn 3 Olivia, which Brad was able to force to deal with on his turn 4 with a Garrick. So he basically just had to waste his whole turn 1-for-1ing that Olivia, and Reid already had a Thragtusk in play. So pretty good start from Reid and pretty slow start from Brad here. So just like we saw in the Swiss, we're going to game 3, and let's see, who's going to get a little fortunate in the 3rd game, because this matchup seems very close.
Yes. It really, really does. There's so much back and forth between the players. I mean, Reid has some fantastic draws at any point in the game, be it Bonfire of the Damned. Olivia is a card that Brad has to have an answer for, or it can win the game on its own. Hunt Match of the Fells forces Brad's hand in playing spells, or that can do some shenanigans, as we saw earlier. And of course, Thragtusk is always looming to gain 5 life, be a big body, and get in the way. There's a lot of cards that he can draw to, but alternatively, there are a lot of cards that Nelson can draw to. We saw game 1, he basically won that game straight up off of a Skurse deck High Priest trigger.
Yeah, and the thing about Brad's deck is, whenever you're a non-blue deck, basically, whenever you can't manipulate your draws or draw extra cards, you're kind of vulnerable to possibly getting land flooded later on.
Yeah.
And we've kind of seen that with Brad's deck throughout the Swiss. And in certain situations, not only can you get land flooded, but you can actually start drawing these cards that are so irrelevant later on. So cards like Doom Traveler are great early on when Brad has Cartel Aristocrat and he's able to start assembling those pieces of his engine together. But sometimes later in the game, they just can't compete to the power level of some of Reid's cards.
Yeah.
So it really depends. What is Brad's opening start going to be? Because I would say we've been seeing these matchups go back and forth throughout the day. Sometimes it looks like Reid is dominating and then Brad slightly crawls his way back in. Sometimes the reverse is true. But in general, I think Reid might have a slight advantage simply because his late game top decks are so much better than Brad's late game top decks.
Yep.
Cards like Obsidian are great for Brad in the late game, but beyond that, he doesn't have that many cards that are just devastating for Reid, whereas Reid can top deck a Bonfire, sometimes Olivia is a bomb, sometimes even a Thragtusk could be huge. Kessick Wolfrun, obviously, we saw that be a bomb for him. So I think Brad's still in good shape because he's on the play, and there are some really early starts that can be just devastating for Reid. It puts a lot of pressure on Reid to have like a Pillar of the Flame early on, or some way to interact with Brad in turns 1 through 3.
Yeah. So we see both players shake hands, some good sportsmanship between the two. Again, both of these players did play on the same team for the last Pro Tour in San Diego. Pro Tour Dragons Maze as part of Team Star City Games, working on that Bant deck together for multiple weeks. We see Nelson and Duke both going to keep their opening hand, and Nelson just starts with a Godless Shrine to get it underway.
And Brad, again, he has plenty of early plays right here. He's got a Cartel Aristocrat, Voice of Resurgence, Blood Artist. We've seen him lead with Voice before. Let's see if he does so again. He has a very similar start to the start he had in Game 1 with Blood Artist, Voice of Resurgence, Cartel Aristocrat. He also has a Lingering Souls and a Varolz in his hand. So very similar start to Game 1. Reid does have the Pillar of Flame, though.
But no Farseek on turn 2 on the draw. I believe if he had one, he would have cast it. I would like to assume as much, at least, as we see Nelson is going to play Lingering Souls and put 2 Spirit Tokens into play.
Yeah, so Brad doesn't have the High Priest like he did in Game 1, so Reid maybe a sigh of relief a little bit. Let's see if he does have the Farseek to ramp up to maybe 5 on turn 4 to get that Thragtusk in play. Reid debating. Again, the turn 3 for Reid is really rough. If he doesn't have the turn 2 Farseek, he doesn't have many plays he can make on turn 3. He does have a couple copies. He has a Rakdos Key-Rune in his deck, but beyond that, he doesn't have many plays he can make, and he probably didn't bring in Liliana in this matchup, so not much you can do on turn 3.
Yeah, but I feel like the best that he can do is probably represent a Putrefy. And,
Definitely.
You know, there's not a lot of great things that he can putrefy. You know, there are certainly things that he can putrefy, don't get me wrong, but I think he'd rather have the ability to just save that for Obsidat, as here comes a Garruk Relentless pumping out a Wolf token, and this will change the way that Duke has to play this game now.
Yeah, unfortunately, a top deck Bonfire right here won't be able to deal with the Garruk itself, so he's going to have to wait a turn here. Let's see, does Reid actually have a Huntmaster of the Fells here? Either way, Huntmaster or Olivia could fall to that Garruk.
Yep. And it is going to be Huntmaster of the Fells, so 2 life and a Wolf token coming in to play for Duke, trying to get his footing here. But now a Bonfire of the Damned will actually get the job done on Nelson's current board.
Yes. And let's see how Brad wants to negotiate this. He does have a Royal Scar Stripe. He looks like he has a Tragic Slip as well to go along with the Cartel Aristocrat. So he could kill the Huntmaster of the Fells and develop his board with both Varolz and Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah, quite a few options here too. Don't forget about that Lingering Souls that's in the graveyard as well. How does he want to navigate this is very, very interesting, because he has a lot of options. I mean, we haven't even looked over the Garruk options yet. I mean, fighting is easy, but maybe he wants to pump out a 2/2. You see, he wants to fight here and flip into Garruk of the Veil Cursed. Maybe he wants to use that for the following turns to start sacrificing. Maybe he just wants to put out 1/1 Death Touch Wolves. This turn is going to navigate, and it's going to set the base for the following turns.
Yeah, I think if he just flashes back Lingering Souls here, he just exposes himself too much to Bonfire. Even a hard cast Bonfire for 2 would be pretty devastating if he flashed back Lingering Souls. So I think his best play is to just drop out the Cartel Aristocrat and the Varolz, because both of those are pretty resilient to Bonfire.
That's exactly what he does do. So those 2 creatures that do give him protection against Bonfire are in the house. And so now if Reid is to Miracle Bonfire, or even just cast a Bonfire for 2, yes, he'll take care of the 2 Spirit Tokens, the Wolf and the Garruk, but it'll leave Nelson with a Varolz due to regeneration, Cartel Aristocrat due to protection from red.
Yeah, and yeah, pretty bad situation for Reid. He will be able to deal with the Garruk, but Brad will be left with the Cartel Aristocrat, a Varolz, and he still has that Lingering Souls in his graveyard they can flash back. So it's going to be a tough situation for Reid here, because even if he does have an Olivia, Brad does have that Tragic Slip, and he can trigger Morbid easily on his side. So he has answers to Olivia, he has answer to a Thragtusk potentially, and Bonfire of the Damned isn't that effective against his board anymore because he played both Varolz and Cartel Aristocrat.
Yeah, kind of funny to say that Thragtusk isn't the best draw right now. I mean, the life buff is actually pretty good, pushing himself to 21, assuming his next land isn't, you know, a Stomping Ground or one of those Ravnica dual lands that'll deal him 2. But again, it's not the greatest card in this situation. It's decidedly mediocre. Yeah,
it's basically just gain 5 life and put a blocker out there. Obviously, Brad has ways around that blocker, but Reid's in a tough spot, because even Curse of Death Soul's not that bad, but even that, you know, Brad's going to keep his Garruk in play. He's going to be able to churn out another creature off of the Garruk, and then, or potentially he could just search up an Obsidat. So a lot of options for Brad here. Reid just plays that Thragtusk and gains 5 going up to 21. So let's see what Brad decides to do. If his draw yields him anything better. He looks like he has a Cartel Aristocrat here. So yeah, some definitely a lot of decisions here on Brad's side. Just shows you how complex this deck is.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that he can do here. He doesn't have any creatures in his graveyard because the Pillar of Flames is the card that was dealt with, that was used to deal with the Voice of Resurgence. So he can't scavenge right here. So he doesn't have too many great attacks with Varolz or Cartel Aristocrat, unless he wants to start sacrificing some creatures, which I'm not sure he wants to do just yet.
Yeah,
I think he's better off just building up his board a little bit and just attacking with those Lingering Souls.
Yeah, he just pumps it. That's exactly what he does. He just pumps out a 1/1 Death Touch Wolf token, attacks with the Lingering Soul Spirits, plays Cartel Aristocrat, but most importantly with the play of that Cartel Aristocrat is he's adding to his board, but he's adding Resilient Threat to his board.
Yeah.
You know, ticking up Garruk, you know, and we'll bring Garruk, the Veil Cursed, on the screen for you guys so that you can actually see something that doesn't actually happen very often, which Nelson may or may not be building towards, is the ultimate on that card. Because the ultimate on it is -3.
Yep, and he does gain an overrun.
Yeah. It's a -3 where, yes, there aren't any creatures in the graveyard right now, but Varls can say, actually, there are quite a few creatures in the graveyard. I can make that happen if I need to. So, you know, it's likely that he's just trying to build towards the -1, maybe to search for an Obsidat, sack a Death Touch Wolf, turn that thing into an Obsidat Ghost Council. But something that Duke needs to keep in mind moving forward is that the -3 ability on that Garruk the Veil Cursed is very real moving forward.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see what happens if Brad upticks it yet again next turn, and then he flashes back his Lingering Souls, then we know what's happening.
Yeah.
Although I think probably the safest play for Brad is probably just sacrifice a creature and search for Obsidat. You know, you probably want to just crank out Obsidats at this point, and especially since you have the Tragic Slip as a way to deal with the Thragtusk.
Sure.
So Reid here debating his options. Again, Brad's assembled a pretty solid army on his side, very resilient to all the removal that Reid potentially has. Again, Curse of Deathhold, there's only one copy in his deck, but not that effective here. It would deal with the Lingering Souls token and one of the Wolf tokens, but beyond that, not much else. Looks like we do have another Huntmaster that fells, giving Reid a couple more life and another 2 creatures to block with. And then we have a Farseek here. So Reid just tries to develop his board a little bit more. He does have a Wolf Run in play, which could be relevant later on, but again, Brad just has such a dominating board presence. And like you said, there is that potential that Garruk was eventually going to do something really good. Is it going to be search for an Obsidat, or is it going to be search for a Blood Artist potentially, trying to drain Reid out? Maybe search for a Blood Artist this turn, search for another Blood Artist next turn, and play both of them, try to
Fireball
them, so to speak. Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot of options with that. You see Duke's turn, not really all that impressive. He does cast a Huntmaster of the Fells, gets a Wolf token, gets 2 life, does Farseek to kind of ramp up a little bit. One thing to keep in mind here moving forward, Osip, as you see, Brad is probably ahead right now. And Reid is trying to stabilize here, is that you take a look at Nelson's life total. He's at 14. A Miracle Bonfire right now turns things around, not because it really does a nice job of clearing up things on Nelson's side, because it does an okay job of that. It's going to leave Nelson with a Varls and 2 Cartel Aristocrats, but the fact that it would move it would move Nelson down, to 8, and then he's staring those creatures in the face. That's kind of the important part here, is that it can actually allow Duke to get on the offensive, which is something he cannot do when he's looking at this mess of creatures.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up the Kessig Wolf Run, because a top deck Bonfire, you know, again, Brad does have a resilient army, so to speak. He will have 3 creatures still in play, and he can flashback Lingering Souls. However, he will drop to 8, and then he's facing down 4 creatures along with the Kessig Wolf Run. So that's really, it can be very scary for Reid, for Brad rather, if we start seeing a top deck Bonfire. However, looks like we're going to have 3 creatures swinging in, 2 in the air and 1 on the ground. That creature does have Death Touch though, so any creature Reid blocks with will fall to it, even though it's just a 1/1.
So how does, I mean, again, the important thing here for Reid too as well is that clearly he's behind on the board and he's trying to catch back up, and maybe he's trying to just change things and just delay things until he can get to a Bonfire of the Damned. Maybe that's his game plan right now, but also look at where his life total's at right now. He just went from 21 to 18. Thragtusk gaining 5, 2 life gained from both the Huntmasters, that's gaining 4 life. So he's been able to keep his life total high enough where you see Brad's board presence is so dominating, you'd think that Reid would have taken more damage over the course of this game, but that's just simply not the case.
Yeah, so here Brad does activate Garruk, and it looks like he's just going to sack a Lingering Souls token to search for the Obsidat. And Obsidat will gain him 2 more life, bringing up to 16. And however, Obsidat, you know, doesn't really have a great attack. However, it can keep putting a little more pressure on Reid. And eventually, you know, Reid still doesn't have an answer right now to the Garruk, the flipped Garruk. So he does have a Huntmaster that fells in play, which maybe he can try to pass next turn and flip it. However, Brad does have a Tragic Slip. So Brad will be able to cast it to prevent the Huntmaster from flipping to give his Garruk another turn.
So Nelson casts an Obsidian Ghost Council. Is going to move up to 16, and Duke will move down to 16. So life totals are even. I'm not entirely sure that board presence is. But Duke is going to untap and draw a card.
See,
What
is it Bonfire?
He draws so slow.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
You know, the thing is, the way he draws his cards, it could be a Bonfire, and he's just debating whether or not he should use it right now,
Or how much to use it for.
or how much to use it for. So you don't really know. Reid definitely, he doesn't just slow roll his opponents; he slow rolls the audience as well. So we don't really know what he drew here. There is that potential there for a Bonfire then, which would greatly. It would at least make this game much more interesting.
The ability for Bonfire to turn around a game at any point, and you see Reid really, really deep in the tank, contemplating what to do this turn. Again, we don't know what it is. You guys don't know what it is. Brad doesn't know what it is. He's probably sitting here wondering, all right, what the heck is that card?
Brad must be sweating right now. And I gotta say, Wizards really did a good job with the Miracle mechanic, because you definitely build the intensity with those cards in decks. So Reid still in his draw, or no, maybe he's out of his draw step now. That card is still on the table. It's not technically in his hand yet, so he hasn't officially drawn it. We could still be in his draw step. Not really sure where we're at. So maybe he's still doing the math, or are we in his attack step now?
Yeah, it looks like we're in
so
attack.
yeah,
Okay,
it
so
looks
it's
like it
not
isn't Bonfire.
Well, okay, so
Looks like we're just gonna attack.
It's probably not Bonfire.
It could, yeah, maybe it's not
probably
Bonfire.
Not, but I'm not positive.
So let's see what Reid does here. Reid's at 16. How does he navigate the next turn? Can Brad potentially kill Reid on his turn? Reid is at 16. Brad has 2 Cartel Aristocrats, which could potentially gain protection from green and attack over. He's got that Obsidian coming back in, which will drain Reid down to 14. I don't think that Reid is dead from any swing on Brad's turn. However, you know, Blood Artist does change that math a little bit. You know, is Garruk going to survive this turn? Is Kessig Wolfram going to be used to just kind of deal with the Garruk, or is Garruk going to be able to search out for another Blood Artist? So that's really the question.
You see the attack here from Duke with Thragtusk, Nelson double blocking with a Wolf token and a Cartel Aristocrat. Cartel Aristocrat can get protection from any color at a moment's notice here. You see Duke organizes the blockers in such a way it looks like the Wolf is first and the Cartel Aristocrat is second. Priority passing, moving along, no Kessig Wolfram activation, so Duke is able to get rid of a Cartel Aristocrat, which I'm slightly surprised about.
And I think maybe Brad was expecting Reid to actually activate the Wolf Run, and you know, with 2 sacrifice effects, I think he's probably okay with losing one of his Cartel Aristocrats and not having to pull the trigger on that Tragic Slip just yet. He's also putting Reid in a position where, okay, maybe I'll just try to flip my Huntmaster here and kill the Garruk that way, and then Brad can get him with the Tragic Slip.
So after the dust settles there, Cartel Aristocrat bites the dust, as does the Wolf token. Duke gets a 3/3 beast from the Thragtusk, and now we're in his second main phase, and again, he's deciding what to do with all of those lands, and Kessig Wolfram among them, as we do have another update here. The winner of this match between Brad Nelson and Reid Duke, you'll be playing against Team Mana Deprived this evening. Josh McClain wins his match 2-1 over Valentine Mackel, playing Bant Hexproof, and here is a very good draw step from Reid Duke in Curse of Deathhold, the one of.
So Curse of Deathhold here, it's going to kill a Lingering Souls token along with a Wolf, and it's going to shut off the Lingering Souls in Brad's graveyard and actually turn off any potential Blood Artist shenanigans. So Curse of Deathhold, a pretty good draw here. What is Brad going to do? It looks like he's going to possibly just sacrifice.
That attack from Duke was so very good earlier, because that killed 2 2/2s, a Wolf token and a Cartel Aristocrat, just with 1 Thragtusk. It's not the matter that, you know, the attack on Garruk, but the fact that he killed 2 2/2 creatures. Duke is, yeah, he's happy to pass back now. He feels like his work is done on this turn. I'd say he had a pretty good turn here.
And not only that, but he paid 2 life to put an Overgrown Tomb into play.
That feels
representing
like
Putrefy,
yeah,
for that Obsidian, which is phased out currently. So here we do have the Tragic Slip. Brad has no grip right now, and suddenly his board presence just evaporated.
Yeah, I don't know where it went.
And here comes the Obsidian. It's going to drain Reid down to 12, I believe, because he was for 14 from that Overgrown Tomb. So let's see what Brad draws for the turn. Again, Reid is representing a Putrefy. Reid is at 12 life, Brad is at 18, thanks to the Obsidian Ghost Council. Brad still has that Garrick in play, which can either sacrifice a creature to search out and lose it, or just put a token to play. But again, putting a token into play is basically just going to uptick the loyalty, because that token is going to die immediately to Curse of Deathhold. So let's see what Brad does. Brad could just attempt to attack with Obsidian here. It's a 4/4, so it'll trade with 2 of Reid's Wolves. However, he can just sacrifice another creature to search out another Obsidian, potentially trying to win that way just by draining back and forth.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, maybe the thought process here is because, again, Obsidat's a 4/4. You see that Duke has 2 2/2s and that beast token, so I think if Duke were to block, he would block with a 3/3 and a 2/2. It would force Brad's hand to actually just take down the 3/3 most likely, and then he can sacrifice, I guess, one of those guys, loses Garrick the Veil Curse, and search out another Obsidat and hope to ride that to victory. But that plan feels dubious at best. But again, I don't know what his best plan is when he's facing down a Curse of Deathhold, because it changes the way he has to play the game dramatically.
But he does have the cards that can beat Curse of Deathhold, because we mentioned this before the match. He's got Obsidian, he's got a way to search for another Obsidian, and most importantly, he has Varals.
Yeah.
So Obsidian is actually a very good scavenge for Varals. Yeah. So he could just ride a giant Cartel Aristocrat to victory potentially, maybe a couple turns down the road. Let's see what he decides to do here.
Well, he's going towards Cartel Aristocrat because he's scavenging onto that, making it a 3/3.
I actually like this plan, because Brad's basically, Reid just has 1 card left in his hand. Reid's not in a very good position to attack. Even if he does attack, Brad is at 18. So if Brad just keeps phasing out his Obsidian, or maybe forcing Reid to Putrefy, it doesn't matter, because he can then scavenge the Obsidian, put it on the Cartel Aristocrat, and potentially just try to attack with the Cartel Aristocrat and give it protection from green. So he might be trying to set up just a large attack with Cartel Aristocrat.
Now think about this too. We believe that Reid is representing has a Putrefy. If not, he's representing one very well.
Yeah.
Think about the Obsidian right now. Okay, let's say that Brad doesn't attack. We move along to the end of turn. Okay.
Yep.
And Brad's trigger for Obsidian, the trigger for Obsidian is on. What do you do with that Obsidian? Assuming that Reid has a Putrefy as his last card, do you remove it? Because if it's gone, then that Cartel Aristocrat can be Putrefied, and it would force Brad to sacrifice the Varals and give it pro green. Then Varals isn't there, which is part of his game plan. Do you even remove Obsidian at all?
I think you would still probably phase it, but it looks like Brad says, I'm pretty sure Reid has a Putrefy here. I'm going to sack my Obsidian to get something a little more effective, like another Obsidian. And again, I think his game plan here is just, play Obsidian, drain you. You're eventually going to have to deal with it. If you don't, I'm just going to keep draining you, and even if you do deal with it, I have 2 Obsidians which I can scavenge onto my Cartel Aristocrat, making it pretty large. And that'll be able to kill Reid in 1 swing, potentially.
Wow, oh wow, oh wow. So Nelson's going to sacrifice 1 Obsidian and lose his Garrick the Veil Curse to search for another one. Obviously a land in his hand, and it's a Gavany Township, which is a relevant one.
Yeah, again, he's still probably just going to scavenge here, yep. So looks like Brad's going to scavenge onto that Cartel Aristocrat, and now he can attack, and Cartel Aristocrat is big enough where even a quadruple block, it'll be a 5 counters and then 2 counters, 7, 8, 9. So yeah, I think he can safely attack with a Cartel Aristocrat.
So there's your scavenge. It goes up.
So currently, Cartel Aristocrat is a 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 8, and Reid only has 7 power on his side.
Well, but depending on what Brad sacrifices to Garrick. Never mind. So Cartel Aristocrat does not have protection from any colors right now. No. It's just coming into the red zone.
Got it. He did not sacrifice a creature. Yep. He doesn't need to.
Yeah, no, he doesn't need to at all. You're 100% right.
He can just make Reid choose to chump block if he wants. It's big enough to survive anything.
I think Reid has to chump block this turn. I think a wolf just goes under the bus here.
It's tricky.
Can you really afford to take 6, 7, 8 damage? It normally would be 9 because of Curse of Deathhold. It's going to be 8. Can you afford to take 8 damage knowing that Brad can just push through damage the following turn because of the protection ability?
Well, the real tricky thing is here, what do you do with that Putrefy?
Assuming that there is a Putrefy.
Yeah, like, did Reid bluff a Putrefy? If he did, that's fairly fantastic considering it forced Brad to kind of sack his own Obzidot. However, you do know Brad has another Obzidot in his hand. You can't let that go unchecked either.
Yeah.
You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if Obzidot goes unchecked, it's going to keep draining you. You have no pressure on the board, really. And even if you do kill it, it's another card that you can scavenge onto that already gigantic Cartel Aristocrat.
Wow.
So let's see what Reid wants to do. Reid still has that Keswick Wolf run. So it looks like the Wolf is just going to jump in front of a Cartel Aristocrat. And what is it? Does he want to use that Putrefy now to sort of clear the way of Varals and just start attacking? Can he afford to do that? I don't. It seems like we're going to get an attack from Reid next turn, and maybe an activation of Keswick Wolf run.
Our entire thesis, for lack of a better term, is assuming that Reid has a Putrefy in his hand. That's the best part, is he's just going to untap and move on.
Well, even if he does have a Putrefy, I don't think he can cast it. He still has to worry about that Obzidot. So I guess maybe Huntmaster of the Fells would be a great draw right here. Olivia, fantastic. He's got a lot of outs. But despite the fact that Brad's board position kind of was decimated last turn, because of the fact that, and the Curse of Deathhold dropped, because of the fact that he has Varals and an Obzidot in play, he had the tools to sort of beat that Curse of Deathhold, and we mentioned that before the match.
Yeah.
That scavenge ability is just so great, and especially when you put it on a card like Cartel Aristocrat, which could potentially just kill Reid outright if he has a way to sacrifice a creature and give it protection from all of Reid's blockers, which currently are just green creatures.
So now Reid Duke is back into the tank. Both players taking a long time on their turns, and understandably so with the stakes on this match. Moving on to the finals, Josh McClain, I'm sure he is watching over there thinking, if I'm going to win this, it's going to be pretty hard to get through one of these two guys.
Both players playing fantastic Magic, and the fact is, we've seen this in the Swiss too.
Yes.
One player looks like they're dominating, and then someone else does something to swing the match in their favor, and then someone else does something else to swing it back in their favor. So, you thought things were going great for Brad early on, then Reid drops that Curse of Deathhold, things look bad for Brad. Suddenly Brad just says, you know what, forget it. I know what my plan is still. I figured out what you're going to do. Even though you have a Curse of Deathhold, I'm just going to ride this Cartel Aristocrat to victory, and you're going to have to find an answer to it.
And part of my game plan involves sacking Obzidot Ghost Council to go find another Obzidot Ghost Council.
Yeah.
Hey, whatever it takes, am I right?
Cartel Aristocrat's hard enough to deal with when it's a 2/2, let alone when it is a 8/8, or a 9/9 rather. So let's see, Reid still, we still think that he has a Putrefy in his hand. We're not positive. Did he bluff the Putrefy the turn before?
I mean, it's so tough, right? Because there's so many things that just go into the thought process that he has a Putrefy. Is losing 2 life worth representing a Putrefy? He had to play an Overgrown Tomb untapped to represent a Putrefy. No one is 100% sure if he has Putrefy except for the person playing the Jund deck and currently reaching with his tokens and attacking in Reid Duke. And now, as you mentioned, we thought we might see this attack here and put Varals to the test. Again, Varals is not a 2/2. It is a 1/1 right now because of Curse of Deathhold.
So Reid could activate Keswick Wolf Run for 5, potentially dropping Brad down to 8. And he does have, it looks like he has 2 cards in his hand. One of them is that Putrefy. Does he have a Tragic Slip potentially?
Sacrifice here.
And does he have that wow.
Yes, he does.
So he does have a Tragic Slip, and he does activate Keswick Wolf Run after this. Looked like it was mid-combat, so he activates it and he deals 6 this turn. Brad still has an Obzidot. Unfortunately, he drew a Duress, which isn't effective against Reid's empty hand.
Yeah, it would have been fantastic last turn.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Brad just has that Obzidot. Obzidot can come down, dropping Reid down to 10, bringing Brad up to 14. Unfortunately, it's just a 4/4, and if he chooses to phase it out, Reid does have 5 power worth of attackers, along with 8 mana, and one of them being a Keswick Wolf Run. So Brad does, in fact, phase out that Obzidot. And let's see what Reid draws for the turn. Brad is at 14 life. He's got 5 power. He can activate Keswick Wolf Run for 5. So dropping Brad to 4. Reid is going to drop to 8 on Brad's turn, and then potentially dropping down to 3 on his turn.
So you see Reid analyzing, taking a look at what Brad has over there, trying to figure out now what he can and cannot lose to at this point. this turn very, very crucial about how he wants to go attacking, what he wants to do with Keswick Wolf Run, how large the activation should be, if there should be an activation at all, and how he's going to play against this Obsidian that he knows is coming. Additionally, he doesn't know what card is in Brad's hand right now. Not the slightest idea.
Yeah, and the good news for Reid, though, is that Curse of Deathhold shuts off a lot of Brad's draws.
Yes.
He does have to be wary of that Gavany Township. You know, Gavany Township can potentially make the Obsidian back up to a 5/5. However, I don't think there's any way that Brad can burn Reid out down from 3. So Reid's going to go to 8 now.
Nelson draws his card. Obsidian comes back. What does he draw?
And can't quite make it out. Looks like it's potentially just a land. Even if, again, there's not many cards that Brad can draw here. Even if he does activate Gavany Township and makes his Obsidian a 5/5, he can still only bring Reid down to 3.
You see Nelson doing the math this turn, trying to figure out what are my outs, what can I do? Did I draw the card that I need? Reid, am I going to lose to you again? Twice in this tournament.
To that Keswick Wolf Run?
Yeah, are you going to best me again with that Keswick Wolf Run? Are you kidding me?
He might have to just leave that Obsidian. He might not be able to phase it out. Maybe he has to leave it back to block. Either way, though, if he doesn't have another blocker, Keswick Wolf Run's probably going to finish this out just because Brad's at 5 life only. So Brad really low on options here. That Curse of Deathhold just shuts off so many of his outs. It looks, a Garrick. So it looks like it is a Garrick. But again, Garrick not that great right here because all it can really do, it can kill a wolf, but still there's that Wolf Run in play. Yeah. That Wolf Run is threatening lethal next turn.
Brad with a shoulder shrug, a bit of frustration, trying to figure out how much can my Obsidian soak up so that I don't die. Is there anything I can do?
Yeah.
Garrick Relentless would have been a great draw.
Can we see how
turn.
much mana Reid has? Because so it looks like he can activate it for 6. So if Garrick comes down to just trade with that beast token, he can still make the wolf an 8/8 and 4 damage with trample over. So I don't think he'll actually kill Brad if. Let's
1,
see.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yep. So if
6 plus 6 makes the wolf
an 8/8.
8 minus 4 is 4.
So Brad will drop to 1, but the wolf. So he kills the wolf. Oh wait, he's thinking about it.
Yep.
If he kills that wolf, then the extra power of the beast will kill Brad.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Activation for Wolf Run next turn, assuming that Duke does not draw a land, is for 6.
It's for 6. So it could make the beast a 9/9, and Obsidian is only a 4/4 currently because of Curse of Deathhold.
Yes.
So if Brad can't phase it out, he just can't phase it out. So he does in fact kill the beast.
The funny thing is Brad wants to actually kill the wolf token because he wants to flip Garrick the Veil Curse and actually be able to use it moving on, but he can't do that.
He can't do it.
So Duke is going to untap.
Does he draw a land?
He draws a card. It's a mystery.
So here it is. Here we are. The good news for Reid is Brad doesn't have any more Obsidians left in his deck, and he knows this because he's seen his list. So let's see. What does Reid have here? He can go all in on the wolf, dropping Brad to 1, and he'll still have a Curse of Deathhold in play.
It's almost like, aren't all draws good for Reid here? I think he's scared of. I think the thing that he's scared of, even though I don't know if he can play around it, is if Brad has a Tragic Slip. I guess if Brad has a Tragic Slip, that wolf would be dead and he'd be attacking, so he doesn't have a reason to play around Tragic Slip. As he's going to go down to 6. Here he comes, activate everything.
And he did have the land, but again, like you said, he was afraid of the Tragic Slip.
But no reason, no need to play around Tragic Slip, and that is it. Reid Duke wins. Wow. 2-1 over Brad Nelson. Jun is moving on to the finals to play against Josh McClain and Junk Reanimator. And isn't it fitting that to the finals we see Junk Reanimator versus Jun, arguably the 2 best decks in this format. Each side thinks the matchup's very good for them, and 2 very, very capable players are going to battle it out to see who's going to be crowned Grand Prix Miami champion.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great match. Obviously, we saw it in the Swiss, same thing again. Unfortunately, Brad fell short both times in the Swiss, and now here again in the top 4. But regardless, a great run by Brad.
Yeah.